at all. But now that you're becoming more aware and more sensitive, and you realize that you do have not only the right, but the responsibility to take care of yourself, if you need a break, please do feel free to turn over and rest for a moment, come back as you're ready. So would you please lie on your front? It doesn't particularly matter. You can face whichever way you like. Have your hands somewhere near your head, and if you can, find a way to rest your head so that you're looking to the right. And then bend your knees and bring them close together so that your knees touch and your ankles touch. And in this lesson, your knees and feet will stay together. So whether you think of them being glued or Velcroed or some other way of connecting them so that they stay in that relationship throughout the lesson until I tell you otherwise, this is the predominant position for this lesson. And so if I ask you to begin to tilt your legs to the left, can you keep that constraint and find a way of letting your legs tilt? Okay, so you're discovering that it does mean that one knee has to lift off the floor a little bit, the pelvis has to lift and roll. And there's a twist coming into your system. And go gently and slowly. Because what we're interested is in how we do it, not how far we can go or where we get to. And could you now have the intention that your legs go slowly over, but then come quickly back? Gently, slowly, and then they flip up and come back again. And notice what changes when you introduce the quick part of the movement. Do you become aware of some other part moving, being pushed or pulled? Different parts joining in or not joining in? And if you're not sure, go back to going slowly down and slowly up. Make sure that your knees and your feet stay connected. And Feldenkrais suggests that in doing this movement, you may get the sense that during part of the movement, you begin to feel taller or longer. So just notice, is it as you take your feet to the side that you feel longer and where? Or is it as you come back that something seems to extend? And just in your own time, explore They're going over, they're going back. The difference between fast and slow. And somewhere is there this sense of taller, longer. Might like to notice what happens to the connection between your face and the floor. Does something move there? Head stays to the right. And maybe if something does have a sense of elongating, what was it that was short in the first place? And so then can you shift your awareness between the sensation of a bit shorter, a bit taller? Going back and forth, short, tall, short, tall. And then maybe bring your legs down, just pause and rest for a moment. Just empty the brain. Then bend your knees and glue them together again. And just come back to tilting your legs over to the left, back to the center, and notice, what are your eyes doing? Do they tend to move as your legs move? And next time you tilt your legs, could you just pause for a moment and get a sense of how far are your feet from the floor? Okay, so we've talked about all the different things that might contribute to that sensing. What's happened in your muscles and your joints? Do you have some kind of internal sense of the angle of your knees? Or do you kind of imagine stepping outside of yourself and looking to see what the angle is and how far your feet would be from the floor? And then leave your legs tilted over to the left and begin to lift your top foot away from your bottom foot. Now you're still essentially lying on your front with your face turned to the right. So for most of you, your legs won't be reaching right down to the floor. So the left leg's staying kind of dangling out in fresh air, and the right foot hinges at the knee and lifts away from the left foot. Okay, knees stay together. That's it. Can you allow your eyes to have the intention of looking at your right foot or move in that direction? So your head's still lying quietly on the floor, but your eyes are wondering, what is that right foot doing? And can you sense in your kind of imaginary visual image, what's the distance between your 2 feet when they separate? Okay, so left foot leaning out to the side, right foot lifts away. What's the distance? Can you have the sense that your eye can look at the right foot, look at the left foot, and judge the distance between them? Okay, and then let everything down. Just rest and refresh for a while. You might like to explore, how do you do letting go and refreshing? And then bend your knees again. Stick them together. Tilt them over to the left a few times, gradually with the intention of increasing the movement. So maybe that starts to pull through your body. You might feel your right elbow needs to slide a little bit to allow you to come all the way to the floor. Maybe your head needs to turn slightly. Just notice, where do you adjust to allow your feet to touch the floor? Keep your knees and your feet glued together so that the pelvis really has to lift on the right and roll over. You might even find that your elbow has to lift away from the floor. And notice, how do your feet touch? Do they touch with the little toe? Do they touch with the heel? With the side of the foot? And then gently let your feet rest on the floor. So turning the rest of you as much as is necessary to allow that to happen. And just feel the sides of your feet on the floor, or the side of your left foot on the floor. And just gently take your toes away from the floor. So leave your heels down. It's only a little movement. Just a funny little twist through your legs and down, up and down a few times. And notice what has to happen through your legs and your pelvis to change the angle of your feet. Can you keep your heels touching and do that? Just a little movement. And then next time the toes come up, they could keep heading in that direction and begin to lift the feet away from the floor. a little bit and down again. And can you track that movement all the way up through your system? So you begin with the toes. So something's got to happen in your ankle. Legs move in your hip joints. Pelvis does something. Travels up through your spine and your ribs. And you sense the changing shape of your chest. The toes lead the movement and then the heels follow so that the feet come away from the floor a little bit. Feet stay together, knees stay together. That's it. Good. Keep it quite a small movement, just so that you can track how does that movement travel through you. What effect does it have all the way up through your chest, your ribs, your shoulders, all the way up to your head. You might notice that your head gets pushed or pulled on the floor. Maybe your neck changes shape a little bit. Let it go. Think about something different. It's a complex movement. We don't often turn our feet and ankles in that way. And then back onto your fronts. Those of you who've rolled, bend your knees, glue them together, tilt them over to the left to rest on the floor. And this time, can you have the intention that you're going to lift your heels away from the floor? So your toes stay down, but your heels lift. It's kind of the opposite from what you just did. Notice, what does that require in your pelvis? So leave your toes on the floor for the moment, just your heels lifting. You feel that travel through your ankles, up into your hip joints, inviting your pelvis to move a little bit. Get the sense that as your heels come up and move a little bit up and forward, the pelvis does a similar direction. Then if you go back to leaving your heels on the floor and lift your toes, that tilts your pelvis the other way. And then alternate a little bit. Just gently and slowly, a tiny movement. Heels lift, toes lift. Can you feel how that really connects into your pelvis? Even though it's incredibly fascinating, make sure that you continue to breathe as well. Sometimes that makes it easier. And let it go. Have a rest. Maybe you can feel the changes happening in your brain, new patterns being laid down. One of the definitions that you might come across of the Feldenkrais method is doing non-habitual movements in unfamiliar positions. And this is a wonderful example of that. As you lie there, is there an echo of that somewhere still in your system? You know, that sensory memory that Susan spoke about the other day. The sensation of movement after it's gone. The idea of the connection between the movement of your feet and ankles and something happening up in the center of your body, in your pelvis. Come onto your front again, bend your knees, stand together. Okay, tilt them across to the left. Just see where they go now. Just go slowly a couple of times. And then leave them hanging over to the left and bring your right foot away from the left foot. See, something's changed there too. How do you sense the gap between your 2 feet now? The left foot stays hanging out to the side, the right foot moves away, hinging at the knee. It's like having a room full of crocodiles. Snap your feet together. And a couple of times, just tilt both legs again, slowly to the left, quickly back to the center. Has that changed the way you feel the movement travel through you? Has it changed your sensation of tall and small? And then let your legs come down, but stay on your front if you can do that for a moment. And just scan along what's changed in your contact with the floor. Your legs lie differently than when you began. Does one side of your pelvis make a clearer contact with the floor than the other? Maybe one side of your chest has a sense of being a bit flatter than the other. Is your neck a little softer? And how much of your face is actually lying on the floor now? You're lying right on your bottom ear? Or you're lying on your cheek? And just a very tiny amount. Can you roll your head a little bit left, a little bit right, so your nose comes slightly closer to the floor? Still with your head facing left. Okay, put right, sorry, facing right, left ear's on the floor. So just a small amount. Can you find a way of moving the same amount in each direction? So maybe your nose only comes a couple of millimeters closer to the floor. Back of your head comes a couple of millimeters closer to the floor. Can you feel the contact of the floor rolling its pressure across your jaw, cheekbone, maybe your forehead? But make sure that you only bring your nose towards the floor as much as you can take it away from the floor. It was interesting reading the transcript and watching the video of this lesson. There were lots of young, gung-ho, enthusiastic people doing huge movements of their head in one direction, but not in the other. And Feldenkrais had to shout at them very loudly many times. So the cake's obviously done you good. Interested in finding this axis of rotation around which you can move equally. So that requires it to stay a small movement. And as you roll your head, is it just your head moving? How far down through your system can you sense that connection? Toes? Well done. What about all the bits in between? Feel something happen in your neck? If you think that your neck goes all the way down to your tailbone, you feel a little kind of hint of a nudge on the ribs as the movement goes past. There's a subtle shift in pressure on the front of your pelvis. And then as you roll your head, could you think of actually rocking it a little bit around that axis so that your nose just comes away from the floor ever so slightly? And your head was probably turned almost as far as it would go, so it's got to be a tiny little bit. But just the sense that there's a beginning of curiosity in that direction of over your shoulder. And bend your legs again. Stick them together. Tilt your legs over to the left. And lift your nose away from the floor automatically. And how easy or difficult is it to tilt your knees now? Something learned how to join in that movement that perhaps didn't know how to before. That allows that twist to come all the way through your system and eventually reach your head and lift your nose. Now, if you take your right hand and put it on your back with the palm somewhere on your low back, tilt your legs. Think of your nose coming away from the floor. And whether you wanted to use your olfactory senses to smell what was happening over near your feet, or whether you wanted to use your eyes to look over your shoulder, what would help with the lifting of your nose away from the floor? Aha, it's around about this stage, Feldenkrais says, and by now you might need to do something with your left arm. So find a place that's comfortable for it, where it doesn't impede your movement, which probably means sticking it headwards so that it's a bit out of the way. As you roll, your head can lift, come up off the floor. And you can check out what's happening in that space where your feet have gone. Okay, let it go. Rest. As adults, as we get socialized and as we learn words and language and kind of think of ourselves as a collection of parts, we sometimes fall into patterns of movement where bits seem to move on their own or not, as the case may be. If you think about the movement of a small child, which you would have done, so it's in there somewhere, there's a sense of fluidity and connection that everything joins in. The baby wants to look at something, the eyes move, the head moves, the shoulders move, the trunk moves, pelvis moves, everything all joins in. The whole person gets involved in the movement. Come over onto your tummy again, bend your knees. Stick them together. Tilt your knees over. And notice, is it easier to lead with your toes or your heels? You could alternate. You could have the intention that it's going to be your toes that touch the floor first or your heels that touch the floor first. What effect does that have on your hips, your pelvis, spine? And the next time your feet are over to the side, you could leave them there, have both hands back beside your head again, and lift your head to look over towards your feet. Does it make it easier to see your feet if they lift towards your head? It's a really weird movement where your knees are staying tilted, but your feet kind of lift off the floor. Everything's really twisted through your system, but your head and your feet can lift and somehow come together. This looks a bit like a mermaid to me. Can you really bring your awareness to what your pelvis is doing in this? Is it just your head or your feet? Or can you think that the movement might be initiated in the middle? That the pelvis could do something that lifted your head and your feet together? Does it change the quality of the movement when you initiate it much more from the middle? Fantastic. Let it go. Roll onto your back. And then one last time, come over onto your front. Then your head to the right, bend your knees, let them tilt to the left. And can you think that it's your pelvis that's going to move your head? So start with the side of your face on the floor. So just have your feet as far as they comfortably hang to the left. Face is on the floor. How could your pelvis begin to move your head? What would it need to do? Make it a very tiny movement so that you can really sense the axis of rotation. And just a little tiny, quick oscillation of your pelvis so that you really get that sense of your pelvis moving your head. Now, of course, it's moving your feet as well. And then a couple of times, bring your feet back, take them over to the side, feel everything connected all the way through. Roll onto your back. Notice, has the floor changed shape again? Do you have a sense that one side of your ribs is making a different contact with the floor than the other? The top of your ribs press differently than the bottom of your ribs. If you were to gently roll your head a little bit left, a little bit right now, just go very slowly and gently. You find that one side is easier or smoother, or more like rolling downhill or uphill. In some lessons, we alternate doing something to the left, something to the right, compare the differences. This lesson has been very much in one direction. So maybe you do sense a marked or a slight difference between one side of you and the other. And sometimes that's a strategy that we'll use for really emphasizing a contrast to help us notice things that perhaps we mightn't otherwise be able to sense. So just notice, which side would you choose to roll to as you come up to standing? Is that your normal side, or has something changed there? So in standing, do you have a sense of tallness or shortness? You have a sense of sidedness, that one side is in some way different to the other. And see what happens if you walk. Has this twisting to one side influenced your sense of yourself as you move through the world? You're inclined to go around in circles. And just notice, is it easier to turn to one side than the other? Which side did you try first? Yeah. And also suggests that if you were to take a basketball and throw it into the hoop, it would probably miss to one side. Imagine doing that. Do you have a sense that one arm is longer than the other and might push the ball one way rather than straight ahead? Which side would it miss? And so just as a matter of interest, how many of you are feeling decidedly lopsided now? Okay. You'll have a couple of days to adjust there. Okay, so just have a moment if you need to have a water out break.